Hello, my name is Olivia Brown, and I'm going to present today on reflections on fall 2021 semester. As I reflect on this semester, what stood out to me was A Gardener's Tale by Dr. Cameron Phyllis Jones. I enjoyed how she used an allegory of two planter boxes, one with red and one with pink flowers, to address institutional racism, personally mediated racism, and internalized racism. She explained the story of a gardener who brought two boxes, one filled with nutrient-rich soil and one with poor rocky soil. The gardener preferred red flowers over pink flowers. Prejudice against. She chose to place the red flower seedlings into the rich soil box, while the pink seed she placed into the poor rocky soil box. The gardener nurtured the red ones by watering them, talking nicely to them, and making sure they received the best sunlight. However, she did the bare minimum for the pink ones. Whenever a pink bud shifted by the wind into the red box, she plucked it out. As expected, the first generation of red flowers thrived and grew to a remarkable height, whereas the pink flowers in the poor soil struggled to survive and grew to a middle height. The progeny of the red flowers also flourished, whereas some of the pink progeny died, and those that remained continued to struggle to grow. As the pink flowers noticed the different ways in which they were being treated and how the red flowers were burgeoning, they wanted to become like the red flowers. When the bees came around to pollinate, they told the bees to bring them red pollen, not the pink pollen. They did not see their values. They compared themselves to the well off flowers and wanted to become like them. Internalized racism. In this example, the gardener symbolizes the government and that she had the power to decide, to act, and to control resources. The personally mediated racism occurred when the gardener decided that the red flowers were better than the pink ones. The institutional racism occurred by supplying the red flowers with the best environment, the soil, to thrive in. Throughout the flower's life cycles, the gardener provided more more nurturants and plant nutrients to the red flowers. If we take this example and apply it to contemporary society, one can compare a lower inner city and a higher income suburban neighborhood and observe the differences reflected. One environment is comprised of dilapidated buildings, high crime, polluted air, poverty, food deserts, overcrowded schools and homes, and multiple liquor or convenience stores, while the other one has spaced out houses, low teacher to student ratios in classrooms, a higher tax base, green spaces, sporting centers, clean air, plentiful grocery stores, and low crime. Which neighborhood is more likely to produce college graduates statistically? From generation to generation, the environments do not change, yet society expects the outcomes to. The term meritocracy assumes that if one works hard enough, one should be able to obtain the American dream. If one has so many barriers in the beginnings of one's development and never witnesses an alternative to the environment around them, then how likely is one to succeed? When I have observed success stories, it is usually due to someone stepping in and showing a child that they matter. As a solution, Dr. Jones suggested that we take the soil from each box, mix it, and distribute it equally into the two new planter boxes in the name of equity. This is where social workers can come into action. As social workers, we can work within these marginalized communities to listen, to educate, to empower, to collaborate, to organize, and advocate. We can listen to the community narratives and build rapport. We can make folks aware of political laws affecting their communities and bring our skills to help organize or to collaborate with present organizations. We can advocate with the community members to the local government officials, urban planners, health facilities, law enforcement, and educational institutions for community improvement policies. In addition, we can work individually with students or adults by listening to their stories, recognizing their strengths, collaborating to develop present-day coping skills, and creating a plan for today to meet their short and long-term goals. If there is no hope, we must help to develop it. Social workers are justice workers, working for equity and not just equality. In addition, I learned in this semester about Yoso's 6 types of human capital, the innate personal assets that one utilizes to survive in this society. Aspirational capital includes one's hopes and dreams. Familial capital is a strength formed from familiar history and culture. Social capital includes an individual's access to social networks and community resources. Navigational capital is the ability to work with various cultures competently by cultural skills. Resident capital is the ability to challenge the status quo, to stand up for what you believe is just, amid opposition and apathy. I most relate to this source of capital. As a teen, I was deemed a rebel without a cause. As an individual, I've always rooted for the underdog. As an employee, I've always spoken my mind, which has not always served me well. Part of my rationale in pursuing social work is to discover effective ways to advocate for institutional changes. And the sixth form of human assets is linguistic capital, which comprises bilingual and social skills. During a work training, I first heard of cultural competence, which is developing knowledge about and respect for one's own and others' cultures, and utilizing that knowledge of culture in communicating with the population that you serve. It also stipulates tolerance for cultural differences. However, in this semester, I learned about cultural humility, which utilizes competency as a foundation and enhances it with continual self reflection and assessment. As a social worker, it is easy to think that we know all the answers. I mean, we have researched cultural topics, attended trainings, networked, and worked with diverse populations. However, cultural humility proposes the fact that we do not know it all. We each come with our own implicit biases, which affect our client interactions. We must continually check ourselves for our isms and phobias, such as classism, sexism, racism, xenophobia, homophobia, as our biases are not just thoughts in our heads, but play out in our attitudes and behaviors. Cultural humility implies a continuous cycle of introspection and evaluation of how one can improve in cultural awareness and communication. We cannot fix what we do not acknowledge. And to expand the reflection process, one can gain constructive external perspectives from supervision, participation in formal social work groups or informal squad, or a social mentor. Environmental justice was a term I had never heard of until this semester. I had watched the movie Erin Brockovich and heard about Flint, Michigan and the Dakota Pipeline, but I was not aware of the extent of the harm done to those communities. However, reading up on how climate change is not just something that Al Gore and Greta Thunberg spoke about, it was a racial justice issue. It disproportionately affects mainland minority communities as many polluting industries are sited there. It affects the global south, south of the equator countries who emit the least amount of pollution, yet receive the adverse effects of climate change by their northern neighbors. I was watching a news story about Madagascar, wherein there's a lack of water for drinking, cooking, and bathing, nor to irrigate the land for crops. One lady on the program lived in a small hut with 5 children, and all that she had to feed them was boiled cactus leaves. This story showed doctors that were there measuring the size of children's arms and bellies to determine the level of malnutrition. In America, there is so much excess, and yet these babies are starving due to pollution that we export into the global environment, which causes droughts. In one of our Learn One, Teach One sessions, I first heard about Cancer Alley. It is a 70-mile stretch of land in which multiple polluting industries decided to locate. Low income and African American residents predominantly populated. The residents have been contracting and dying of cancer at a higher than national rate. The companies have not received any behavior altering punitive consequences. They continue to contaminate the local communities. The residents are fighting back, however. It is challenging to fight back when one is sick. People will ask, why don't they just move? Well, why should they have to? Number one, they were there first and have long established roots. And secondly, it's not easy to sell property located in a toxic environment, and the polluting companies offer the residents lowball amounts so that they would be at a loss to start over. In terms of the environment, it has truly become profits over people. However, as social workers, we can assist the residents in forming community groups to protest against the corporations, to make the nation and stockholders aware, to advocate for legislation to institute pollution limits, and to find those companies who fail to abide by the laws, an amount that would deter future noncompliance, and to transfer and utilize those monies collected to make the affected communities and individuals whole. Finding a multi-billion-dollar company $1 million does nothing to encourage them to do better. The punitive consequence must match the offense to deter future environmental injustice. What did I learn this semester on an experiential level? I wrote my first biopsychosocial assessment, addressing a client's biology, psychology, and social areas. I learned the importance of separating the objective versus subjective statements in case notes. I learned to focus on a person's strengths and resiliency versus on their problems. I learned about the person and the environment theory, which looks at the social roles a person has, the environments in which they participate, their psychology, their feelings, thoughts, stresses, and their physical arena. During this term, I was able to delve more into critical race theory as a research paper. I had heard about it because it was utilized in political rhetoric, but I wanted to know what it actually demonstrated so that I could meaningfully defend it when someone negated it. And last but certainly not least, I learned that I have the intellectual capacity to perform graduate level work. For years, I put off going to graduate school for fear of not being good enough, not being able to maintain the workload, and of writing a thesis. Researching and writing papers are anxiety inducing for me, but with each assignment, I'm able to practice the thing which scares me. I hope that it becomes easier in time. There is a therapist who is a YouTuber whose mantra is, we can do hard things just one step at a time. Attending university as an undergraduate with no responsibilities was way easier than 20 years later with a full-time job. However, it is possible. I know that this was over the 3 to 5 minute limit. My apologies, but I hope you enjoyed it. Professor Nelson. Have a great holiday season and a new year. Bye.